things that are out in my patio, and when I'm walking to my car every day, they're going back and forth on the ground, on the
Lizards?
sidewalk. Are they lizards, are they anoles, or?
They're probably brown anoles. If they're mainly on the ground, it's the brown anoles. Green anoles are a little bit more arboreal.
I'm from South Florida, and we have iguanas everywhere in South Florida. How do they harm? Like, what are they harming?
So a couple of things, and that was one of the slides. They eat a lot of ornamental vegetation. So a lot of your folks don't like that. They do dig burrows occasionally, and it can cause problems with that, but it's mainly the eating, and if you eat a lot of plants, I don't know if you see what comes out the other side. It's kind of messy.
Aren't they here now? Like, people have seen them?
So yes, every year, because we have a cold snap, you'll hear about the iguanas falling out of trees. I know one year at Lake Eola, they had them falling out of the pond. And again, I think most of those are probably releases. I don't know of any established green iguana populations here in such Fort Fred. I don't know if you've heard any. Now, the spiny-tailed iguana is another type of iguana. I have seen adults and babies or juveniles in the DeBerry area. I don't see them a lot. It's been a couple, 3 or 4 over the 25, 30 years I've lived there. So I'm thinking there might be some there, but not a strong population. Again, they're not real cold tolerant for now. I don't know at some point if the ones that survive are a little bit more cold tolerant, then they're left to reproduce. Another one you're going to hear about, about the monitor lizards. You got the big Nile monitor and big water monitors, and the Nile monitor is the one that's established in South Florida and well established now. And they're 6, 7 feet long, feed on all kinds of wildlife. And then tegus. Tegus is a South American teid lizard that they get about 3 or 4 feet long. They're big and husky, and they're also very, very opportunistic. Eat just about anything. They have also been, we never found a Nile monitor in Seminole County, but we have found several of the tegus. And I'm hoping they're not finding each other and reproducing.
Years ago at the environmental center, there was a big.
I do remember that. I'm trying to remember what it was, whether it was a tegu or a monitor. Yeah, unfortunately, you get a lot of folks that they get tired of it. They think, oh, I want it to be free, and they turn it loose. And unfortunately, oh, we'll take it down to that nature preserve, and we'll turn it loose there. And then other lizards, a couple of smaller ones, the curly-tailed lizards. Those are established now in Seminole County in a couple locations. And then the bright yellow-headed, it's one of the rockagamas. I think it's Peter's rockagama. Bright orange-red or orange-yellow-red head, a little bit on the tail. There was a population of those in Sanford even back 25, 30 years ago, only in one location that I knew of. Now, if you, all you on iNaturalist or go on iNaturalist, they're popping up all over now. They spotted them down at Lake Eola Park. What impact they'll have, don't know. Maybe they'll eat some brown nose because they're big.
Are the brown nose really that destroying any of our natural?
They're competing with our native green anoles and I believe fence lizards. I think they've had the impact of actually eliminating fence lizards on some of our natural areas.
Okay.
There's a herpetologist at FWC that doesn't agree with me. He thinks they can coexist, but I've got not documented case studies, but I've seen it.
You're seeing more browns and the greens are kind of
No, the greens go up. No, I still see browns and greens on our properties. Again, the greens have adapted. It's the fence lizard that doesn't seem to be able to adapt to a heavy population of brown moles. All right, so this is a fairly recent, in the last 12, 15 years. The exotic apple snail, the channeled apple snail. This is not even a full-grown one. They get a little bit bigger than this. We do have a native apple snail, which is about half this size. Very important because you have some really specialized predators of our native apple snail. The Everglades snail kite, you've got limpkins, things that would prey on that. And when these first showed up on the scene, they were really worried because the snail kites, there was a study that showed them they would try to get in their beaks, and they just weren't able to get in. They were using up a lot of energy, and they were worried that it was going to affect them long term. Well, jump ahead 12, 15 years, what do you think's happened to the snail kites?
Adapted.
They're doing good.
Yeah.
They're doing really, and they're actually expanding north because they've actually gotten a little bit larger. Some of their bills have gotten a little bit long, so they're able to actually take advantage of this food source, and it's a bigger food source. instead of getting a Crystal hamburger, you get a Burger King double Whopper. The other thing that's doing good, early on, 30 years ago, it was rare to see a limpkin here or there. Now I go out for Christmas bird counts, lots of limpkins. And I've seen them eating these. I've seen alligators crunching on these things. So now they still can defoliate. I mean, they eat a lot. They're eating machines. So again, I don't want to make it sound like it's okay that they're here, but
Do limpkins also feed on the invasive clams as well?
They do.
Because like the limpkins near my house, they kind of like a big, like I call it like the treasure pile of like all these shells just everywhere. And I noticed they're mostly clams more than apples.
yeah, the clams, the mussels, these guys, yeah, they do. All right. You know, I think I'm going to leave the toad till last because I don't want to handle it and then handle these snakes. I do not have a Burmese Python. If you're not Burmese Pythons now, FWC has passed rules that you can only keep certain. If there's a prohibited reptile list or reptiles of concern list, and you have to have a permit, you have to have a microchip, and so on, which is good. It keeps pet owners more responsible.
Don't you gotta have a specialized license too?
Yes, you got to have license, and there's a fee for it, and so on. For that, for venomous. The little one I have here is not really an invasive species. One might turn up here and there in Florida because they're probably, I don't know if they've surpassed the corn snake yet as the most popular pet snake, but, oh, wrong one. I'm not going to hide that back, so y'all let me know if that's snake.
Don't even say that.
Herpetologist, herpetology, of course, the study of reptiles and amphibians. Folks that keep herps or herpetoculturists or herpetologists, they've developed all kinds of strains, albinos, and everything under the sun. So they're very, very popular in the pet trade. You go to some of these reptile expos, and it seems like about 75–80% of the booths are selling some kind of ball python. So it's a very popular pet. Lucky for us, they don't survive well in the wild here, or I think we would have ball pythons. They're smaller, they don't get as big. 5 or 6 foot would be a really big ball python. They are a constrictor, they do prey on rodents. So if they were to get out, they could have an impact on and compete with our native species for food. They're a constrictor, of course, not a danger to humans or pets. Well, maybe a small pet. A small cat, yeah. Or rabbit. Yeah. But of course, if your cat's indoors where it's supposed to be.
Absolutely.
And I will have this one out if anybody wanted to pet it or get a picture of it. It'll be available for that. And then I like to bring a native too, just to kind of show that some of these are competing with. Now this native I have is probably not suffering lower numbers from an invasive species. It's suffering lower numbers from habitat. So I was going to bring our indigo, but she was in shed. So.
Oh.
I don't want to say I brought the next
Oh.
I like all of them. Does anybody know beside you, Fred, what kind of snake this is?
Rat.
Snake.
Florida pine snake. It is listed as threatened now in Florida. It's one of our larger snakes. They get to about 7 feet long. They're not real adaptable to alterations in their habitat. They like high, dry, sandhill habitat primarily. You might find them in scrub. They can kind of hang on in orange groves that have been put in those areas as long as their prey base is still there. Their favorite prey is pocket gophers. You know what a pocket gopher is? Not a gopher tortoise, but a pocket gopher, which is a rodent, which is also very rare now. You only find those in some of the high, dry areas. But they will also eat other rodents and in the eggs of ground nesting bird like quail and turkey. They're also a constrictor. Interestingly, live in a high, dry habitat in Florida. They've got relatives out west, the bull snakes and gopher snakes. And if you've ever seen them act in a defensive posture, they rear up, they open their mouth, and they blow. It's really loud. It's pretty impressive when you see one or hear one of these doing that. They spend a lot of time underground. They push down into those pocket gopher mounds, or they live down in tortoise burrows. They spend a lot of time in tortoise burrows. Now, one animal that we mentioned that has the potential to affect these because they'll use burrows are those tegus. Because the tegus will commonly use burrows, or they'll dig their own or use existing burrows. And a big tegu could probably take on even a pine snake.
What is a tegu?
Tegu is a big lizard from South America. They get about 4 feet long, and they're big brutes, and they got really strong jaws. So I could certainly see them taking smaller snakes, and maybe even something this large. Any questions? Oh,
That's the same habitat as the indigo.
correct. And indigos, I think, are much more. They like the high dry, especially because of the tortoise burrows.
Right.
For nesting and thermoregulation,
Eggs.
but they also need the wetlands and so on for hunting, because indigos have a much higher metabolism and a bigger appetite than the pine snakes.
So why is the pine snake being threatened for that?
Because of habitat. So what's happened to most of
Same
the
as the indigo. just
what's happened to most of the
habitat.
high dry habitat in Florida?
Okay.
They're all-
It's really sad.
We've
because-
changed it. What we haven't built on or changed into agriculture, unfortunately, a lot of it is not. There's a big thing missing in a lot of that habitat. Fire.
Hmm.
Because they really like open sandhill habitat.
It's such a shame that people, in my neighborhood at least, kill any snake. It just.
And I would hope that everybody in this
No,
room
it's
are good
terrible,
advocates
and
for that.
It seems like there'd be some way to.
That's a whole other
educate
program I would do for, I know you just had a snake program, but my program is called Good Snake, Better Snake. Not Good
Yeah.
Snake, Bad Snake, but Good Snake, Better Snake. And I don't know if there's really any better, but.
Do you think we lose a lot of them because of that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I'm
Because they
hoping
can
it's less
adapt.
nowadays. And my biggest, I get the most comfort in the programs I do for younger folks. And they'll tell me, we tell our parents not to kill them.
Yeah,
Because
good.
and of course, we do what we can at our little nature center, in, ingraining that into the kids' heads.
He seems fine being handled, but.
So all of our, I shouldn't say all, 90% of our snakes at the nature center are captive, born and raised. So this one we've had since it was a hatchling. A wild pine snake is probably not going to behave that way.
He's not gonna be crawling up your shoulder and wrapping around your neck.
All
I
right.
love snakes, I'm like you.
So many years ago, of course, South Florida is known for what agricultural crop?
Sugar cane.
Sugar cane. And they had a problem years ago with a beetle that was eating the sugar cane crops. Well, what can we bring in? What is found in South America that would eat that? Well, the big cane toad, the big giant blue toad. And this one's really only about half grown, so it's just remember that when you see it. And I have to use a diaper.
Is he as bad as a kitten?
When you say as bad, I'm not sure what you mean.
Is he as invasive?
Well, in this area, no. We do get occasional reports of these up this far. I don't think they're really reproducing that strongly up this far, but I could see where in time they might, as they get more cold tolerant. Again, as a kid in Miami back in the late 60s, early 70s, I can remember looking down the storm grates in the streets and seeing these giant toads down in the storm grates back then.
Aren't they poisonous?
They are. They've got the big glands here behind the eyes.
Yeah.
And especially, dogs that, and again, I'm a dog owner, dogs that don't have any more sense than they chew on them. It's not a good thing.
Are they poisonous?
So yes, they are poisonous. Well, so are our native toads. They have the same glands, they're just not quite as toxic and don't produce as much as a big toad like this. Well, these guys, they ate the cane beetles, but they also ate all of our native insects. They learned a food dish, a dog bowl or a cat bowl. Oh, that's a great place. They just eat food right out of the bowl. This one, we just dangle a fuzzy mouse, a dead, thawed out fruit, and it just gobbles up that. Pretty voracious appetites.
How pervasive are they?
You mean
Like
here
in our Florida.
in South Florida? They're very, very thick, I guess you'd say. High populations in South Florida. But
And
again,
are they, is it on a target list to eradicate?
You know,
Or is it tolerated nuisance?
I think pretty much it's there. It's a nuisance. I don't know. I've not heard of any concerted effort to remove them anymore. Unless anybody else has heard that, I don't know. I've never heard of anything that they're doing to try and get rid of them. Unfortunately, with, these, the Cuban tree frogs, there's just so many of them, and they're in such remote areas. It's just really hard to do that. Now, the Burmese python's a different story. They're trying. Will they ever find all those needles in a haystack down there? But they're trying. I mean, they've got folks out there hunting them and trying to.
Can they make them sterile somehow?
Well, and that's an interesting
The
thing.
reason
There are ways to put out bait for certain animals. Of course, you got to make sure it's only hitting the target species. So what are you going to put out there that would sterilize? I don't think, I've not heard of anything for any snake species that would, en masse sterilize the population. I don't know if you can see what he or she is doing.
Blowing up.
Blowing
Oh, I
up.
see.
Yeah.
And that's common with even with our native toads, when they get grabbed by something, it makes them look bigger. If you're a snake trying to swallow it, it makes it harder to swallow because it's.
He's got spear going.
What do you mean by that? Like, who would they be, who or what?
So
would
they
talk
secrete,
to?
and I don't know if you heard of this, any of you heard of this. In Australia, where they also have these, not the dogs this time, the other animal that's got a much bigger brain but doesn't use it all the time, people were licking these.
Oh.
Licking them to get a high off of the poison.
Oh my gosh.
I don't recommend that. So yeah, I'll wash my hands. It's not, when it secretes it's milky and you can see it when it gets really agitated.
Gives them autism.
What predates it in native territory?
So I would imagine, and Fred, please jump in if you know of any. I would imagine there's probably some native snakes that can eat it in South America. Here in Florida, we've got our native toads are poisonous, but we have the hognose snake, water snake, garter snakes can eat them. So I would think that there's something in South America that can probably eat them. Interestingly, I think it was the crows or ravens in Australia, where these live, have learned to flip them over on their back and tear into their bellies to get at the food, the organs and so on, and they avoid the poison. So, I don't know. I haven't heard of the crows in this country, doing that yet. But even the Cuban tree frogs, I have seen some of our native species of snakes eating those. I have seen red-shouldered hawks preying on those. So somehow they're getting past that.
Will pythons eat them?
Well, I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. Yeah, pythons will eat other cold-blooded animals like alligators and so on, but I would doubt they would eat that.
Well, anything probably trying to eat it would taste that.
Well, yeah, we get that.
secretion and go like.
Unless they figure out a way to, like I said, like the
Ew, I don't
ravens,
want
they
that.
flip it over and go in from the belly. Which, that's not an uncommon predatory tactic for like porcupines. How would you attack a porcupine? Well, if you're a fisher, which is a type of marten or weasel, they try and get underneath it. All right, well, I apologize for the mix-up in the slides. I had quite a few other slides, but
One more invasive species always kind of surprised me, even if I'm walking way out where, you don't think anything's gonna be. It's
Right.
fire ants.
is what?
Fire ants.
Oh, fire ants. Okay.
And, no matter where you go, you seem to come across, and here's another invasive. I'm just always wondering, what species they're really impacting and.
Oh, and I think you're probably as familiar with I am about, there's some of the things like the Florida king snake. They attribute some of the decline in it to preying on the nest, ground nesting birds.
The Bob White's.
Bob White. I don't see Bob Whites anymore.
Yeah.
Is it because of fire ants? I don't know for sure.
There's been
certainly be.
research done on it.
Has there? Okay.
The birds nest on the ground, and the fire ants just crawl on the belly and scare the parents away from the nest.
That right?
basically.
Yeah. Yeah, because the chicks are precocial, so they would be able to get away.
Before them.
But they do have a biological control that works, but it's not working to the point where it's getting. They got a little. It's a 4-inch fly, and you can probably Google it and see the little videos. This little fly buzzing around the ants, and it'll fly down and hit the ant on the head. And what it does is it lays an egg on the back of the ant's head. The egg hatches, the larva goes inside the ant's head and basically eats it. The inside of the ant's head falls off.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, it's not having a good enough
You've got
effect.
billions and billions.
Oh, I know. In my yard, and the bad thing is anything you use to control them, I've used the Dawn detergent soak in the mound, I've used Amdro, I've just sprayed. Within 2 or 3 days, a mound pops up nearby.
They just move.
They just move. They just move, yeah. So we, the whole thing about bringing in exotic, one success story we have with a plant, the air potato, I don't know if you're familiar with the big heart-shaped leaf, air potato. We had air potato raids at one of our properties in Seminole County for years, and our volunteers would collect thousands of pounds of potatoes. And then in 2013, we released the air potato beetle. Pretty little red beetle that only preys on air potato, or only eats air potato. And I tell you what, nowadays, you're hard pressed to go out and find a huge covering of air potato. You'll see the air potato will come back, the vines will start growing around June, July. Come July, August, all of a sudden you're going to see those leaves start to get skeletonized, and the beetle population explodes. And
Is that
so
the same as the ground potato leaves?
no, ground potatoes are different. The air potato, the potato grows on a vine above ground.
Okay.
There's the native smilax vines that have the potatoes, and then the potatoes that we eat, they're just separate.
Yeah, this one's the one that strangles all your trees and kills them.
Well, it's not a strangler thing, but it can cover the canopy, and yes.
Yeah.
And anything to do with those potatoes when you catch them, when you collect them?
Well, when you collect the potatoes, throw them away. Yeah, don't leave them laying out there. But again, even if they sprout now, it seems like the beetles, and they're also working on a beetle that focuses more on the potato itself.
I was wondering, I just didn't even think of this until now, but all the parrots in Florida, are they invasive or just non-native?
The parrots?
Yeah.
So there are some that are established.
Yeah, like the Nande parakeets.
The
over-
Nandays, the monk parakeets, there's probably budgies,
But are they harmful or are they just?
Well, certainly, they can compete for natural food sources, for cavity nesting spaces. A lot of our cavity nesting birds have a hard time competing with starlings, and some, I would imagine parrots are pretty, I hate the word aggressive as well, because they're just acting as instinct, defending their nesting location. Interestingly, in Sanford, and Fred, you would probably remember this, I remember a flock of Nandays and a flock of the monk parakeets flying around Sanford quite a bit early on. I don't hear or see them anymore. I don't know if winter's got them,
I
what.
hear them every day.
There's a monk parakeet
Yeah, in Conway.
colony in Seminole County.
Where at?
Oh, there's one in Conway by my house every day. They
Where's that at?
It's
Well,
Conway Gardens.
That's okay, Orange County? Okay.
In Seminole, yeah, I can't.
Yeah, I just haven't seen them and heard them, because I would hear them flying over Sanford.
But, I mean, don't you think in general it's gonna get worse? I mean, like, I am originally from Colombia and Venezuela, and like, I see the videos and everybody in Venezuela talks about, the macaws, how they come now to people's balconies and people think it's cool, and that's the deforestation of the Amazon. So, I mean, in general, without analyzing it too much, I just think it's gonna get worse.
Right, yeah, I mean, and again, a lot of the birds, the herps, it's responsible pet ownership and not releasing them. I had a brother that had a cockatiel. He got 3 or 4 more cockatiels by putting the cage outside. And he'd go out there and there'd be a cockatiel sitting in the cage. Come visit him.
Well, they're leaving the Amazon because of the fire, so. I mean,
Well, I don't know that they're leaving the Amazon and flying to here.
No, but I
But
mean, they're
they're-
making their way,
yeah.
I think eventually, maybe not in a.
Well,
right
yeah, I
now.
don't know if they can
They're-
survive in between, but maybe. And interesting, again, as a child growing up in Miami, it's funny watching the old home videos. We have me in diapers playing in the kiddie pool, and our chicken, our rooster, our rabbit, and our capuchin monkey. And we're all playing. And the same thing I can remember as a kid, twice. Once it was a brown capuchin, we had a white-faced capuchin show up in the yard. I guess because there was another monkey. And then we had I don't know, it was a spider monkey or some other kind of monkey. Showed up in the yard. Because back then you could buy a capuchin at a pet shop for $50. Thankfully that's not the case anymore. And a lot of these exotic animals that you keep as pets, they really don't make good long-term captives. People get them thinking, oh, it's a nice pet and it's nice and cuddly. Okay, yes, and rhesus monkeys, of course, we know that the source from those were the old Tarzan movies at Silver Springs.
Right.
They have spread out. You're
Right.
seeing them all along the St. John's, the Wekiva, but don't seem to be in big populations. I know somebody else that had a game camera out on the Wekiva and caught one on their game camera. And even in DeBerry where I live now, we've had them a couple of times.
Do they do damage to it? What do they?
Well, I would imagine, again, they're probably, in a small number not, but they're preying on native wildlife. They do carry disease.
Yeah.
They're not a natural part of the system, so.
I heard that, always heard the story that they were from the Tarzan movies too. And then more recently, I heard that they were lab animals, they weren't in the movies.
Well, I mean, that is true too. I mean, they do use them for a lot of research. I don't know that there could have been a research facility at
I
some
just
point where some of
wondered.
them got out. But the ones at Silver Springs, that's pretty much.
Yeah.
And then there's another species of vervet monkeys that are also, there's a colony of those in South Florida. And I believe squirrel monkeys are also
Oh
established.
my gosh, I didn't know that.
I have a question. What is the FWC doing about cats other than like the spay neuter return? Because like I go to
They don't condone that.
yeah. Oh, because like I go to Merritt Island and I see people literally feeding the stray cats at Merritt Island, and I've written a letter to them, and they
To
said,
me,
oh,
that's the agency that's managing that land. We've had in Seminole County, I'm not even gonna say what's on the agenda next week, but if they've tried to establish colonies on our county park properties, and we don't allow that.
What do you do when you see something like that? Do you
Uh,
report it?
Animal Services, we ask Animal Services to come in and trap and remove them. And then they'll work with the folks doing it, hopefully, and get them off of the property, and they can set their colony up somewhere else.
Yeah, see, we've got a person that not only has probably 15 cats in her house because she's cold. They've given babies, now she does spay and neuter them,
Right.
but she still continues, but she takes them in, but she can't get them adopted, so she still has them, but she still continues to feed the stray. And I did make a concern about this and asked if we could trap them, and they downright got nasty.
Like I said,
"You
it's,
cannot set no trap on my property to catch
It's a
the cat."
very, very touchy subject. That,
I thought it was against, I mean, I know
It is.
somebody that had
Yeah.
11 cats and somebody.
Most
in a
of your-
corporate
most of
because
your,
they didn't like it, called the cops and they took the cats away.
Most of your animal service agencies have, or departments have rules that say, at-large pets are are prohibited. So your dog and are not supposed to be allowed to roam off of your property. Unfortunately, and what gets me is like, so what if somebody once said, we want to do a feral goat colony over here? Or we want to do a feral dog colony or a feral Burmese Python colony, or, I mean, it's not going to fly. But the cats. All right, again, I apologize. I can answer more questions.
That's really great.
I can have if you want to.
I just wanted to ask about, and I don't know if you know anything about the Brazilian pepper trees.
Okay, yep.
It seems to be taking over everywhere.
Everywhere.
And is anybody worried?
Good
Oh,
luck.
we do. We spend many thousands, and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year controlling invasive plants on our properties. And other agencies do too. Unfortunately, in areas where the roadsides or private properties, there's no agency that knows the need to do that, they're always going to be there. They haven't.
Displace everything else?
They do. They're very invasive, and you end up with a monoculture of Brazilian pepper if you don't get on top of it. Go ahead.
I was wondering, are rock pigeons considered invasive technically? Because I feel like
Well-
they're so obligate on human structures.
Yes.
Like you never see them in any
I
wild
would
areas.
say you still have to, the rock pigeons, which is our normal pigeons, city pigeons.
Just, yeah.
I would think you'd have to call them invasive because they're not native and they reproduce, but like you said,
But they're so obligated.
they're not having a big impact on our
I was
native
gonna say, they don't do anything bad.
mourning doves or anything like
I
that.
mean,
right.
it's everywhere. But
Yeah.
You never see them anywhere else.
And now they're serving as a good food source for those urban peregrine.
And
There
same
you
with
go.
House sparrows too. House sparrows are the same story.
first one?
Yeah.
But it's
The collar, the bone.
Just meaning like in both.
The bone.